give his remarks.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. First of all, I would like to congratulate Mustafa Shah Saab and the Honorable Senator Syed Mushahid Hussain Saab for organizing this remarkable conference seminar of highlighting Pakistan's most important international relationship with the Chinese Republic, People's Republic. I was listening with a sense of history, having seen a few governments of today's Pakistan's, yesterday's Pakistan's, and tomorrow's Pakistan. And my friend and honorable colleague, Senator Mushahid Hussain Sahab, went across the canvas of how Pakistan has evolved and how China has evolved, and where do we stand today amongst the committee of 193 nations which are affiliated with the United Nations. Because when Pakistan in 47 became a member of the United Nations, we were one of the 47 nation states at that time. China became a member later than us. Fast track 70 years, 72 years, and we are celebrating our relationship of 70 years of the two countries and 100 years of history of the Communist Party of China. We Pakistanis, who were 70 million in 1947 under the leadership of Honorable Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, and became a sovereign nation state. Unfortunately, we lost half our area, December 29, 1971. And the Pakistan of the West Pakistan, today's Pakistan, 32 million at the start is now nearly 220 million. We are a nuclear powered state, no doubt. But as we look upon the evolution of how the Chinese Communist Party under the great leadership of Mao Zedong, the brain power, if I may call it, of Zhou Enlai, who was a student of France. Deng Xiaoping and Zhou Enlai and their youth were students in Paris. And Deng Xiaoping, whose history I follow very closely, was only 17 years of age. And in those days, he evolved as a human being, as a student of knowledge. And he applied many of the principles he had picked up, because France's great leadership was under Napoleon. And many of the qualities, skills that Honorable Mushahid Saab today talks of, he learned from the Napoleonic era. And how to apply it to modern state. Because China's history is full of ways and means of how to establish themselves. Because the Chinese, for 500 years, always thought themselves as the Middle Kingdom, that they were the center of the world. But they got colonized, like we of the then British India, of India first and then British India. But somehow they bristled. They had a sense of dignity and a sense of pride. And we saw that despite Marxism, Leninism, Maoism, it was not till 1978 that Deng Xiaoping took over. And the day he became primus inter pares, the first amongst equal, China really never, in my opinion, emerged on the international global stage as they are today, where they stand today. $14 trillion is their economy. The United States is $24 trillion today. We in Pakistan are $0.3 trillion economy. So our relationship has been an exemplary one, a relationship which is of a different dimension or a model as I see it. But what did Deng Xiaoping have in him that made him completely change China from a struggling economy, an economy that had to constantly look to others for support? What was the burning ingredient in him which brought about the energy and youth in his thinking? He was 74 years old when he took over power. And in my opinion, it was Singapore which gave him the urge. I met Lee Kuan Yew, and he told me that Deng Xiaoping said to him, "You 4 million Singaporeans are fast rocketing ahead of the world with virtually no physical resource. They had no oil, they had no gas, they had no minerals, they had no industry. How did you do it?" The reply was, "Our only and precious natural resource is our human resource." Lee Kuan Yew was a barrister from England. He and his wife both, they went to the University of Cambridge in the United Kingdom. Oxford and Cambridge, of the top 10 universities for the last 40 years, have always been in the top 5 or 6. Highly competitive, allow them their minds to innovate. Creativity is the essence. Innovation and creativity is the essence of ultimate achievement. And they had that basic ingredient, the two of them. Chinese origin, grandfather a peasant, a kisan they came for earning. Turned around, Singapore today has a higher income per capita than the United States. Today. And they reached that, and this is what he told them. He says the day you 1,200 million Chinese can emulate what we 4 million Chinese have done in Singapore, you'll dominate the world. And that was the light which spurred this gentleman on. And where did they reach? The heights. They're still in the process. They haven't yet completely reached the heights, but they're on their way. It's a spectacular performance of 43 years. 1978 he took over. Rates of economic growth of 10 to 13% consistently for 15 years. Pakistan's growth rate, we are proud, we are 3.94% this year, after what COVID has done to us. And that 10 to 13% growth rate was sustained by the other two presidents who came in after him. Jiang Zemin and Hua. And now Xi Jinping. But today China's growth rate is not 10 to 13% because of COVID. It's more like 6 to 7%, but still higher than all the Western countries. But what needs to be looked upon globally is that the third world has another partner. One Belt, One Road, 40 countries are benefiting from it. There was a time every country was looking towards Washington. There was a time when everybody else, once the Marshall Plan had recreated Europe, was looking at Germany, Britain, and France, or Japan. And Japan was again helped by the United States of America after they had put the atom bombs on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And the Japanese Constitution to this day was written by the conquering general, Douglas C. MacArthur. They haven't changed a dot across the T in the Japanese Constitution. And they became the second economic superpower. Why? because the leadership worked for the people, not for themselves. That's the difference. There was no, the Chinese and the Japanese. I just would say that because I'm looking at the true global picture. Reached the heights because their leaderships believed in being under the whip of the desires, wishes of the people of their countries. Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah gave us that lead. Pakistan would not have been the state that we are today. And look at Mr. Modi, Doval, Amit Singh, what they are doing to the Kashmiris. And it is China. So we Pakistanis should be most grateful that after the 5th of October 2019, for 5th August, sorry, 2019, when China, within days, after 1965, were able to convene United Nations Security Council meeting. It would not have happened. It hasn't happened from 65 to 2019, no matter what. You look at the record. And it was under their pillory. They brought Russia on board. It used to be the Russians who would always veto against us, the Soviet Union in the past. And how did China make that breakthrough? Because China footprints today in the world matter as much as anybody else. They have reached that height. They can convince people because others need China's knowledge. I was looking at the Chinese education system the other day. Out of the top 500 universities of the world, there are 3 agencies which rank universities around the world. China has reached the top 500 in number of universities, almost the same as the United States of America. It's really a miracle. And this is the kind of knowledge, the knowledge explosion. Pakistan only has 1 university in the top 500. Quaid-e-Azam University, 486 is our rank. They have nearly 100 universities, as does the United States of America. And then other European countries, and then Japan and other countries. So the methodology, and this was not the case at all 40 years back. It's all happened in 4 decades. And in essence, what they have done is, they have allowed the talented, the capable, those who can assume the responsibilities and duties of their state, of their country, to emerge as leaders in whatever respective professions they want to go in. And if you examine how they have done it, they have emulated what the Western countries did in the Industrial Revolution, 1760 to 1789 in the United Kingdom. Britain was the first economic power of the world, modern power, through the Industrial Revolution. United States, France, Britain, Germany and others followed. Meiji Restoration in Japan brought them up, 1860s. China today. And this is the model, sir, I have greatest respect for, of what Mr. Deng Xiaoping did, and your leadership has kept that up. So with that dazzling, sizzling heights of economic success, economic development, economic growth, today, sir, you can walk around the world, as your president does, and he says, what do you want, $20 billion, $15 billion, $30 billion? He doesn't go to the US House of Representatives or US Senate and say, we'll have to pass the bill. He says, here is the check. Because they know, the Politburo knows in China that he is doing it for the success of his people, his government, his state of China. And they can do that. They can be generous. They can be forthcoming. So your generosity with us, we all know. Not only CPEC, but there are other elements that you have assisted Pakistan in. And I, for one, feel, as a citizen of this country, that I hope and I pray that our relationship, agriculture, sir, is only one of the 7 sectors that you're coming up at the second stage of your that. And you were just telling me before I got up that what your expectations are. We will try our very best, sir, Your Excellency, and your government, and your people, to attain the levels of knowledge, skills, technologies and skills, and knowledge are all interrelated. That is why the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Caltech, Restler Polytechnic Institute, these are the three top institutions in the United States. You have built up similar institutions. Other countries in Korea, Mushahid Saab spoke of drafting Pakistani civil servants. Sir, Korea in 1980 was $80 economy. Pakistan, East and West were $83 economy. Today, Korea is Republic of Korea. The ambassador, and I had dinner the other night, he was telling me they are now $31,000 economy. Where are we? $1,600 economy. And they took our first 5-year plan. They were not the only ones, as you know. Others did it. They were able to implement those plans. Unfortunately, we are still struggling to create new vistas of opportunity and challenges. Our Prime Minister, the Honorable Imran Khan Sahib, the other day when he spoke in Parliament on the budget, he covered the whole issues that Pakistan is facing today. And I, for one, was impressed because I felt that he has caught up. Because this is his first time in Parliament, the first time in government. He was a cricket star, well known throughout the Commonwealth as a very highly performing cricketer of the highest level. But now, slowly he's reaching up to his challenges in Pakistan, and he's understanding over a period of time how other countries have done it. China has learned from others. The man who put them on the stage was Lee Kuan Yew, in my opinion. He started that fire within the belly, as they say. Our Prime Minister, the Honorable Prime Minister, is also getting that fire. Hopefully the people of Pakistan will, on unity. There are three elements on which Pakistanis all concur. Nuclear program, the ultra brutalities against the Kashmiris. We are totally for the Kashmiris, Jammu and Kashmir. And 3, sir, is the relationship with China. And my only hope for Pakistan's future is that this relation builds up. Sir, it's a difficult relationship always, because as the Honorable Mushahid Saab said, when Henry Kissinger was going, Henry Kissinger was very apprehensive before he went to China. But on his return, he was triumphant. And I'm hoping that our relationship of CPEC, and there'll be many other avenues, and when Pakistan's own economy picks up, there'll be many others around the world which will finally be able to say, this is Quaid-e-Azam's Pakistan. Thank you very much.